Aliens, 1986, James Cameron's sequel to Ridley Scott's Alien, Sigourney Weaver, Colonial Marines, The Alien Queen, one of the most acclaimed sequels ever made. What most people don't know is that the crew was certain it would fall apart before the first month of shooting was over, and that one location from this film sat abandoned for 3 years until another director walked in and used it to create one of the most iconic scenes of the decade. Today, 15 facts about aliens, from the actress who auditioned for a film about immigration, to the deleted footage of an actor still in the film he was fired from, to the bonus about what became of the alien hive set after the cameras stopped. Stick around. Fact 1. The crew had worked on the original Alien and quietly decided Cameron was going to fail. The film was shot at Pinewood Studios in London, and much of the British crew had worked on Ridley Scott's original. To them, Scott was a legend, and Cameron was an unproven outsider. Nobody in the UK had seen The Terminator. It hadn't been released there yet. As far as the crew was concerned, he had nothing. Cameron organized a screening of The Terminator for the full production. His reasoning was simple. If they could see what he had already made, the skepticism would collapse. The cast showed up. The crew didn't. Not one of them walked through the door. Cameron was dealing with a room full of empty chairs before he had called action on a single scene. Fact 2. Newt was found in a school cafeteria and never made another film. The production looked at around 500 children. Most had been trained for commercial work. They smiled after every line, which works in advertisements and falls apart completely when what you need is a girl who has watched an alien hive consume her entire colony. Carrie Henn was 9 years old and living near RAF Lakenheath when a casting scout walked into her school cafeteria and took a photograph. She delivered her lines and stopped. The stillness got her the part. She went on to win a Saturn Award, holding her own against Weaver and a 14-foot animatronic monster. Then, she walked away from acting entirely, grew up, and became a school teacher. The most memorable child performance in science fiction history was a one and done. Fact 3. Every weapon in the film was built on older hardware. The iconic pulse rifle started life as a Thompson submachine gun, the Tommy gun from gangster movies. The production wrapped it in the forend of a SPAS-12 shotgun and added a Remington 870 receiver. The smart guns that Vasquez and Drake carry on harness rigs are, underneath all the science fiction dressing, German MG-42s, a design from World War II. The most futuristic-looking weapons in the movie were built on some of the oldest hardware the production could find. New skin over old bones, which is a reasonable description of how most sequels work. Fact 4. The 12 hypersleep pods were actually 6 pods and a mirror. Producer Gail Ann Hurd wanted to cut the hypersleep sequence entirely to save money. Cameron argued the film needed to register the full scale of the squad before they started dying one by one. His solution? Build 6 pods, position a large mirror to double the visible row to 12. The pods were opened by hidden wires and puppeteers, just out of frame. The sequence that makes the squad feel real before you've learned their names runs on half the hardware, a mirror, and fishing line. You are looking at exactly half of what your brain thinks it's seeing. Fact 5. Getting Sigourney Weaver to pick up a gun required a formal conversation. Weaver is a committed gun control advocate, not a casual opinion, an actual position. Getting her into a film loaded with military hardware required Cameron to sit with her and walk through specifically why the weaponry was necessary and why Ripley picking up a gun continued the character rather than betrayed her. She came around and committed completely, nicknaming herself Rambolina while striding through the colony with a flamethrower duct-taped to a pulse rifle. The film changed what she was to Hollywood. The original Alien had made her a star. Aliens made her an actress whose name alone could open a blockbuster. Cameron took the character Ridley Scott created and handed her the entire movie. Fact 6. Vasquez auditioned for what she thought was a film about immigration. Jeanette Goldstein was an American living in England when she received the casting call. In the United States, the legal term for a non-citizen resident is a resident alien. When she heard the title, she assumed it was a drama about immigration. She showed up to read for a tough space marine, dressed for an entirely different kind of role. When she worked out it was science fiction, she returned, nailed the audition, and got the part. Hudson's jab at her, "Somebody said alien," she thought they meant illegal alien and signed up, was already written in the script before she ever walked into the room. Piece of cosmic coincidence that Cameron kept intact. Fact 7. Lance Henriksen flew to London with a suitcase full of knives. The knife trick, Bishop moving a blade between his fingers at speed, just close enough to Hudson's hand to hold everyone's breath, required rehearsal. Henriksen packed a suitcase full of knives and flew to London. He landed at Heathrow, walked up to customs, opened the case, and found himself standing in front of a border agent with an absolutely full suitcase of blades, a man from overseas, a bag of knives, and the explanation that they were for a movie. Somehow, he made it to set. Somehow, the knives did too. Fact 8. Cameron fired people and then delivered a farewell speech designed to sting. Early in the production, Cameron let go of a cinematographer and a first assistant director. He made the set feel like a place where decisions had consequences. The British crew remained hostile throughout. On the final day of filming, he stood in front of the assembled crew for what everyone assumed would be a gracious closing remark. He told them it had been a long and difficult production, and that the one thing that had kept him going was the absolute certainty that one day he would drive out through the gates of Pinewood and never come back, while all of them would still be there. Then he got in his car and drove out. The man whose crew was certain he would fail by week 3 went on to make Titanic and Avatar, a crew that didn't show up to his screening, a child actress who never made another film, an entire squad doubled with a mirror, and a farewell speech designed to leave a mark. We're not halfway through. Still coming. The composer who wrote the climactic score essentially overnight, the actress who brought flowers to every actor on the day their character died, and the bonus, the one set from this film that was never torn down, and what it became 3 years later. Fact 9. The knife trick was done over Bill Paxton's real hand, and Paxton wasn't fully briefed. Henriksen felt the trick only matters if there's a real human being at risk. He suggested putting Paxton's hand underneath his, and doing it for real over actual flesh. Paxton wasn't entirely clear on the extent of the change, which is a significant reason his reaction reads as genuinely rattled rather than performed. Bishop's hand moves at inhuman speed, because the footage was sped up in post. At real speed, it looked impressive, but not artificial enough. On the reshoot, Henriksen caught Paxton's little finger with the blade. By Henriksen's account, it was barely a nick. Paxton apparently reacted as though he had been run through with something considerably larger. Fact 10. The Alien Queen required 16 people, a crane, and 2 operators inside the suit. Stan Winston's team built the Queen at 14 feet of practical creature with no digital assistance. They first built a full-scale mock-up in the United States just to test whether it could physically move, then shipped the entire operation to England. 2 puppeteers worked inside the suit just to operate the arms. 16 people in total, plus a crane, hydraulics, cables, and control rods. The decision to go practical rather than automated came down to safety. Something that large, swinging under automated control, could genuinely injure Weaver, who was standing directly underneath it. 16 humans operated a monster by hand in real time, so that one human could act terrified without being in actual danger. Every Queen shot is in camera. That's why she still holds up 40 years on. Fact 11. The composer wrote the climactic score essentially overnight. James Horner arrived expecting 6 weeks to write and record. What he found was a film still being cut around him, scenes still shooting, the edit unstable, timing shifting constantly. Every time he scored a sequence, Cameron would re-edit it overnight and break everything Horner had finished. His 6 weeks collapsed into days. The climactic Ripley versus Queen battle was composed essentially overnight, then recorded with the London Symphony Orchestra at Abbey Road under the kind of time pressure that makes people leave the industry. That nightmare score earned Horner his first Academy Award nomination. Fact 12. Sigourney Weaver brought flowers to every actor on the day their character died. Every time a cast member's death was scheduled, Weaver was there that morning with a bouquet. Not just the prominent deaths, every death. Every actor. She gave Paul Reiser, who played Burke, a bunch of dead flowers, which, given what happens to Burke, was exactly right. Bill Paxton later said she was the glue of the entire cast. In a production held together by pressure and friction, one person decided to acknowledge the human cost of every single death on screen. Fact 13. James Remar was fired from the role of Hicks 2 weeks into filming. The role didn't originally go to Michael Biehn. It went first to James Remar, a character actor you would know from 48 Hours, and later Django Unchained. Remar was cast, flew to London, and filmed for approximately 2 weeks before disappearing from the production. For decades, official statements cited artistic differences. In Remar's own words, he was deep in a heroin addiction. Police raided his apartment during the London shoot and found drugs. He was arrested, In 1985, that ended the conversation. You didn't get sent to rehabilitation, you got fired. Cameron reached for Bean, who he already knew from The Terminator. Bean flew in and stepped into the armor. Fact 14. James Remar is still physically in the finished film. Remar had filmed for 2 weeks before he was let go. Some footage was too expensive to reshoot. In the sequence where the Marines push into the alien hive, there is a shot of Corporal Hicks filmed from behind, the camera deliberately avoiding his face, showing only the back of his head and shoulders. That is not Michael Biehn. When you watch Aliens, James Remar is still physically in the movie. Back to camera, standing in a role he was fired from. Walter Hill, the producer who had recommended Remar, was furious. Remar later said, "He didn't hire me again for 12 years because I made him look bad." Fact 15. The alien hive was not built on a soundstage. Cameron's team filmed the hive sequences inside a real decommissioned power station, Acton Lane Power Station in London, shut down in 1983. They dressed its grimy industrial interior with black resin, alien eggs, and bodies fused into the walls. When the production wrapped, nobody tore it down. Nobody cleaned it up. The entire alien nest was left there, fully dressed, sitting inside an abandoned building. And now the bonus I've been saving for last. The alien hive sat there for 3 years, untouched, fully dressed. Then, in 1989, another film crew opened the doors. Tim Burton was making Batman. He needed an interior for the Axis Chemicals plant, the factory where Jack Napier falls into a vat of chemicals and climbs out as the Joker. The production team walked into Acton Lane, looked at what was already there, and got to work. The room where Jack Nicholson's Joker was born was the leftover skeleton of the alien hive. 2 of the defining films of the 1980s shared the same physical space, one as the original, one as The Inheritance. The production that the British crew was certain would fall apart by week 3 made James Cameron the most bankable director on the planet. And on the way out, it quietly left behind the room where another icon would be created 3 years later.